Hi, class. Good afternoon. It's Saturday, January 27th. I'm doing our recording today. I know there were some issues with chapter 2 video. Things are all worked out now as it posted YouTube. Link it to the assignment, and I'll do that with this one as well. Not sure what's happening with the Zoom platform, but YouTube very rarely breaks down, so we'll use it. So we're coming to the end of our first 4 chapters. The semester is moving right along. And we're going to look at greater organization today. And we'll look at some things you may or may not know about organizations and technology and such. This week's lecture question I'm going to present to you now, so you can think about it while I'm recording. We're going to learn something about a term called disruptive technologies. That means something new in the marketplace has taken over for something that's old. And I'll go through a lot more of these, or I'll give examples when we get to them in our presentation. But I want you to list 3 or 4 things for me that have been disrupted, maybe since you started high school. So for many of us, 7 or 8 years ago, we know technology and other things have changed greatly. So just look at your past and see some things that you used to do that you no longer do the same way or use the same things for. Okay, my screen is shared. I'll bring up our presentation and we'll get going. Okay, so we're looking at information systems, organization, and strategy. We're going to look at what makes up an organization and what managers need to know about that structure. We're going to look at the impact that people like me and ISIT have on an organization. We're going to look at Porter's competitive forces model, which we're going to see pretty much or reference the entire semester. So I like to show this is the slide I like to show with talking about ITIS in the organization. So we have a normal I here, and I'll go back and show you the slides and give you some input there. But we have an I, which is the firm, our organization. We have the retina in here reflecting a little mirror into our eyes, then go to our brain, and we can make decisions. Well, we're going to see about our environment and see what makes up an organization's environment, but we're going to get something from government, competitors, customers, banks, and other financial institutions, our own culture and politics, and IS, and we're going to do something with it. So IS is going to be sitting right along here to tell things where to go in our brain. We'll go back to here. IT and its relationship with our company really depends on the company itself. And as the bullets here, all 6 of these have some kind of impact of where IT sits in. Our organization structure, we looked at hierarchy already. Same with business processes. Things we didn't quite look at yet are politics or our belief in something greater. Culture, which we both inherit from parents, grandparents, religion, things like that, both play a vital role in our organization, particularly politics, in that different branches of our organization may think they're better than the other. Look at what we're seeing now with our political climate here in the US. We have 2 old guys that are probably going to fight each other for president again, but it's going through a whole political structure, different beliefs of the Republican and Democratic parties, or independents, or any of these other startup political factions. Politics plays a very big role in organization. I kind of like this slide because it introduces us to bi-directional relationships. In ITIS, relationships are always two ways, meaning we're getting something from the organization and we're delivering something back to the organization. And ITIS only works with this relationship. We see mediating factors of what we just looked at, and they're exactly right. And I've seen a horror case when let me get rid of our arrow here for a second. When I started at XLCA in Manhattan, it was a wholly owned subsidiary of a bigger company called XL Capital. I may have referenced this in my introduction. I was the only IT person to start at this company. And then they hired a manager and a system developer. And they were making a deal application. So our transaction brokers could have a system that they could run numbers on, maybe backing the debt for our new Dyson Center, maybe in Marist. Well, in this case, IT didn't take input from the organization on how people do their business process. They didn't care about the environment, only for competitors in the segment, which we could have leveraged something off of. As a relatively new company, we didn't know our culture. Our structure was well defined, and it should have been part of the final decision making. Politics was totally ignored because IT did what they wanted. And this management decision for IT to do what they want led for both of those people that were working on this project to be fired. And I lasted another 11 years with the company before some bad deals did us in. So there's two definitions of an organization. In my mind, there's one. So I'm going to get rid of this technical and behavioral. These three bullets are what an organization is: a formal structure that has resources from its environment to produce an output of some kind, a legal entity with rules and procedures, and finally a collection of rights, privileges, obligations, and so on, with a means to mitigate conflict. This slide should show you that sole proprietorships are not an organization, as they don't have structure. Most entrepreneurships are not as well. We're talking about an organization being that pyramid we talked about with that defined structure: senior management, middle management, and ops. Each level of our organization and each organizational unit of our organization has its different rules and procedures and business processes. And each level of our organization has different rights. So it makes up an organization. And frankly, the third bullet is what causes problems with politics in that organization. I already said an organization has a structure. Just drew that pyramid again. I don't think I'm going to draw it again this semester, but I've been known to do other things. We want to be efficient by having well-defined and tested routines and business processes. And we know that there's a culture in an organization. We have environmental factors. In the environment, I'm talking about not only things around us, and we look at Marist, we look at our environment. We have the Hudson River to the west of us. We have Route 9 to the east of us. We have Hyde Park to the north. We have Wappingers Falls to the south, and so on. That general area makes up our physical environment. Also, to this environment, we have to talk about our competition. And I don't know if I'm thinking in our general area, SUNY New Paltz and Mount St. Mary's and Newburgh are the physical competition for Marist. Vassar has a totally different student they're looking for, as the Bard. And the community colleges often feed the four-year colleges. There is some competition there, but we see more of the competition when those two-year students look to do more. All that plays an effect on how our organizational opportunity operate. We talked about business processes already. A firm was a collection of business processes and as well as people. It's an important thing to remember. There's no business process without people. And here's my highlighted guy with one long leg and two short stubby arms. Anyway. Let me get rid of my highlighter. Next, we talk about organizational politics. Well, we already did. Divergent viewpoints, a source of conflict, a source of competition that other organizational units have to realize and account for, or we're going to have a negative connotation of change, and change won't happen. Our culture is really set around this. Get out of my PowerPoint for a second. Start a browser. Greystone is where I spend most of my working hours, and I'm going to bring up our About Us. So if I go back to our slides, we're looking at culture, what we should produce, where it should be produced, who produces it, who our market is, who do we want to be known as. And that's what Greystone does on this About Us page. We show our founder, who's no longer with us, and then we start seeing who we are. Is a growing nonprofit human services, blah, blah. We get our culture from our mission. So we at Greystone, we're committed to providing support in ever-changing needs of the communities we serve, and so on. And we look at our vision. All people will lead the life they choose. It's kind of vague, but whether it's you and I live in the life we want, or it's the people we support live in the life they ultimately can do, both have the right to do that. And our culture is built around that vision. And our values, we're talking about respect, integrity, honesty, diversity, and compassion. At Greystone, we believe this is who we are, and most people live this respect, integrity, honesty, diversity, compassion to let everyone live the life they choose. But of course, no one is perfect. But this is how we build our culture behind missions, statements, vision, and value. So I don't know as I'm so much of a proponent of produce. It's not all companies produce. Culture revolves around who you want to be. We talked about our environment already. Again, we have a reciprocal relationship, two-way. We give something to Poughkeepsie, Poughkeepsie gives something back to us. Now here's my talk on disruptive technologies. Something new that has gotten better with something newer. Okay. When I was a young kid in the early 70s, I would listen to music on what's called an 8-track tape. And if I had to guess, not many of us have seen an 8-track tape unless you've seen them in a museum, but it looks like this. And I may have listened to a Styx back in the day, kind of a soft rock type band. And it just looked like this, big, bulky, you couldn't fast forward or rewind. You stuck it in the machine and it played, it worked like kind of like a ribbon inside this plastic case. Well, as technology changed, well, I also had these. What we call vinyl. The devices like this, but not Bluetooth, of course, with digital speakers, are how I also listen to music on 33 RPM. We call it vinyl, we call it records, or 45s, which are third the size. This is how I got music in the early 70s. Then, as the 70s were winding down, the 80s were taking over, we got a new form of music. That's a cassette tape, and cassette players. They look kind of like this. And with this device, we started to get mobile music players, i.e. something like the Sony Walkman. Oh, all this is great. And at this time, records and 8-tracks were really a thing in the past, and you were buying cassettes. And then the big change went, and we got a CD player. Which I'll look at this one. Oh, this one here. Back in the day, we called this a boombox. I don't know why anyone would buy it anymore, but here's one. The disc player goes in here. A CD disc looks like this. Something like this. I still remember the first CD I ever bought. It was by a group called Bruce Hornsby and the Range. And I'm not going to go through music or anything like that, but that's the first I bought from these fellas. Bruce Hornsby now is touring with the Grateful Dead, or he has. The Grateful Dead haven't really been playing that much anymore. Well, then as the internet started to get lower and lower in price, we started seeing music show up on the internet as MP3s. And then we would have devices like these to play those MP3s. Well, those got so popular that a company called Napster came over. Known by the logo, the guy with the earphones. This company would take MP3s from non-digital music, digitize it, and let people play it for free. Okay. And there's a history of Napster. They were taken to court by a heavy metal band called Metallica, because they weren't getting royalties on this digital music that they weren't creating, that this Napster company was. Well, Napster got shut down. Metallica won the suit. And lo and behold, Steve Jobs had a floundering Apple computer company, and he invented iTunes. From iTunes begot Spotify or any other method that you want to listen to music. Me in particular, I use, Apple Music, but to each their own. But that's a short history of how I listen to music, showing multiple disruptive technologies. Other things from my time, I used to do research on things called encyclopedias. I doubt you've seen those anymore because the internet is well open and ready for us. You used to use microfiche devices in libraries to look at newspaper articles, whereas I can just go to New York Times Digital, and most schools have free access to New York Times. I can get whatever articles I need from here. So I'm gonna say again, you're gonna tell me about things that have been disrupted since you started high school. There's two ways people buy technology and buy software. That's first movers. They're the inventors of the disruptive technology, and they're the first users of it. We have fast followers who can take the risk of trying something new without having, any thoughts of negative impact to the risk they're taking. And then we have people that are not fast followers at all, that they take time to properly test disruptive technologies and put them into place. I'm more of the latter, especially with operating systems. And we'll learn about operating systems in chapter 5. I tend to err on if it's not broken, don't fix it. In my personal life, I buy the latest and greatest. I'm not going to hold you to the different organizational structures, but our author does a good job at looking at entrepreneurship, machine bureaucracy, divisionalized and professional bureaucracy, and bureaucracy. Just realized that the last bullet is what's important when we're reading along here. That our IS team, not often, it should always reflect our organizational structure, or it's not going to fit in and it won't be used. I love talking about the economic impacts of IT, frankly, because IT is a cost center. They're probably the second biggest cost center that any organization will have, other than its facilities or real estate division. Maybe it's legal. We can never possibly quantify the impact we have on an organization because it's not real. It's going around those reasons to invest in ITIS that we talked about in the first 2 chapters. But we should hope that we're spending so much dollars that are most likely capital expenditures, that we should be getting a fair and positive return on that investment. IT should be able to contract the organization size by cutting transaction costs, but more so enabling more people to make decisions. That's how we really shrunk the organization. Our last bullet, we talk about much later in the semester, that's outsourcing. And I'm a big proponent of outsourcing. That's where we raise either onshore or offshore people to work our IT, whether it's infrastructure, software development, database management, infrastructure. I probably said infrastructure twice because that's what I did. But we can pay other people to do those jobs for us. We can focus on our mission, our culture, our core competencies to be more competitive, ultimately at a lower cost, because hiring IT departments is very expensive. The add-on benefits and other perks of working for company X, it's quite costly. Outsourcing tends to be a cheaper alternative. However, you need skilled people to manage those outsourcers, or costs will skyrocket. I don't know if we've seen transaction cost theory anyway. What it is in a nutshell, We want the lowest cost possible to make some kind of transaction. Meaning, I'm gonna go across Marist and where am I gonna go? I'll go to Smoothie King. I'll have a Smoothie King probably twice a week. Before the Smoothie King app, you'd either have to drive up to the window and order your thing and go pay for it, or you go inside. But you still do that. You could order ahead now with an app, earn rewards and such. That move to the internet has cut their transaction cost almost in half because you need less people at registers. You can move them to smoothie making, and we can repurpose the actual cost of that transaction into better customer service and customer supply intimacy. I'm not going to talk about agency theory. I talked about IT flattening organization because of more people making decisions. I'm going to also add knowledge dissemination here. The more things we can get out of our heads and on paper or on digital format are going to benefit our organization, because then we can lower transaction costs, minimize the effect of people leaving our organization, and maintain profitability. I'm going to talk about change this way. In fact, I'm going to add a second question to our lecture. Tell me how hard it was for you to move from iLearn to Brightspace. Tell me what you thought when it first happened. That's the same thing that happens in organizations every day. ITIS will take a compound, everything's working right, throw a rock in it or skip a rock and cause all kinds of upheaval. I was one of the first full iLearn users. I integrated it in every one of my classes. And that's almost 9 years now. 8 years ago, I stopped giving paper exams. Everything was digital. But I was more than ready for iLearn to take over when COVID hit. And moving to Brightspace, I was so anxious about. And it took a lot for me to get my courses the way I wanted them, just because I wasn't familiar with it. Training was video-based and not always as concise as I wanted it to be. So I had a lot of play around with it. I spent all last summer building my courses. So tell me about your change experiences. We're resistant to change because we're people. We like doing things our way, but we're very proud people. We think the way we do things is the right way. We'll learn from business process redefinition later in the chapter. We'll put some kind of metrics around your business process and see if we can refine it, see if we can make it better, see if we can automate it so you can do something else. No one wants to change your job. No one wants to change systems. No one wants to go to lunch at 11:30 instead of 12 because we had some manager have a whim about taking lunch at 12. No one wants that. The internet greatly lowers transaction and agency costs. The internet lowers everything. And it wasn't always that way. The internet in its early days was very compartmentalized, really given by companies like AOL and CompuServe. It wasn't until we made internet more of a public thing that we started seeing people gravitate to it. And look what's happening in the internet world these days. Costs have gone down so much that we have like 5 and 10 gigabit connections at our homes, which is unheard of. Businesses 20 years ago wouldn't have even imagined that kind of bandwidth, but they do. And there's so much we can do with the internet, especially through portals or intranet sites. So our example, large firm delivered manuals or whatever, but let me get out of here. And also let me know if the captioning bothers any of you while I'm recording. You have some AI built into us to make it more accessible, but I want to know if it's affecting you when you're watching. We're all familiar with MyMarist. That's our intranet page. I'm just gonna log in real quick. This is our one-stop shopping for everything Marist. But can you imagine if we had this at home and we were working off like a old school internet connection that we'll learn about from modems? It would take so long to even open this page. But look what we can do here. We no longer have to print course catalogs. We no longer have to print a faculty member's schedule. You can do everything you need to do financial aid wise and payment wise through here. Well, I don't know if this, can we link to the FAFSA here? Just billing. Yep, we can get to the FAFSA through here. We have our codes for it. I just had to do this twice for my children. It was a humdinger to say the least. And I'll tell a story about humdinger sometime. But the system didn't really need change, but there's change. It broke, it didn't break, it didn't work right. 3 months later, we still don't have a fully, everyone's available to connect to FAFSA, but we can. We can see our financial aid and our loans, etc. We can look at aid years if we have any. Lowering your need to search for information is a transaction cost savings. Our author then goes kind of out there on the next few slides. So I'm not going to really look at so much organizational factors for planning a new system, because I don't think it has anything to do with our environment and our full structure. It has to do with our routines and business processes. Ultimately, how we deliver our finished good, our production-worthy information system, could be affected by culture and politics. And we'll look at the different ways to deliver solutions in chapters 14 and 15. Our environment and structure has very little to do with building an information system. More so, we care about mission, values, goals, and people. Porter's competitive forces model, very important. You'll see it on the midterm. Why do some firms become leaders in industry? We're going to see a video here shortly. Somewhere. We're going to look at FedEx and UPS and their shipping wars. And we're going to see why one is more competitive than the other in ground transportation. We'll see why one is the leader in air transportation for logistics channels. And that's really what we're getting at with Porter's. I like to show it here. So when we enter into whatever we're going to do, let's say we're the University of Al. I'm a brand new online college, and I'm the only guy there is, and I'm looking to take on Marist Online or Villanova's Online or Duke's Online or Southern New Hampshire. I'm looking to get into that space. I'd be a new market entrant, and I would have different ways I would be able to try to be competitive. I would also have to find my place in that market. I would have to find my customers, and my suppliers are really me, so I wouldn't have much there. And we look at substitute products, things we can do to combat these new market entrants. But we'll go back here. Why do some firms become leaders in the industry? Because they do things better than other people. Look at Amazon. They sell e-commerce better than anyone. Yeah, Walmart wants to get there. They're not there yet. But what has Amazon's place in the market done to the company itself? Well, they're able to have their own logistics platform. They're able to have their own ITIS offerings. And that's what Porter's does. It looks at 5 competitive forces, the one being traditional competitors. So we looked at Marist traditional competitors and some that are kind of out there. Other traditional competitors for us are colleges of the same size. And just look at our MAC conference for NCAA. Those are competitors for us. We look at the greater Hudson Valley. The United States Military Academy is not a competitor to Marist. Totally different type of college, totally different market we're looking to serve. We look at these new market entrants and we can say that Grand Canyon University or University of Phoenix are new market entries into the education space, as is this whole online only learning platform. Marist could be considered a new player in that game, even though we've had online learning here at Marist for 25 years now. We look at substitute products and services, who our customers are in our relationship with them, and who our suppliers are in our relationship with them. So we talked about traditional competitors already. They're in our same space. They're always looking to get better to minimize costs of switching. So we'll look at the sneaker industry and how they market to their customers. Can customers easily switch to competitors' products? Can they force businesses to compete on price alone? Oh, up until 2 years ago, I only wore Nike shoes. I thought, and I don't disagree that they're probably the number one shoemaker out there. We'll see a lot of their supply chain in Chapter 9. But as competition has grown and the internet's grown, they have some real competitors out there. Well, for me, I'm not as mobile as I used to be. You'll see me on campus in a wheelchair, and I'm all about comfort to take care of my legs who aren't working very well anymore. And so what did I do? I talked to my doctors and they got me into New Balance. And the shoes I feel are better made, they're American made, they're more comfortable, they have more cushioning, but that's just for me. And it was a huge endeavor for me to switch brands, and I still have Nike shoes that I wear from time to time, but it was a switching cost for me. So Nike had a good relationship with me, made it hard for me to switch. I have. They've not really done nothing but raise the price on similar built shoes that I get. So have I gone back? No, I still buy some things to scoot around in, but when I have to be mobile with my feet, they're New Balance. New market entrants we talked about with online schools. Computer chip business is a very small marketplace. I'm not going to talk about new market entrants there. But we can talk about, let's look at e-commerce and all the ways we can buy now. Those are new market entrants into that Amazon competitive forces space. Substitute products and services are who we can go to if our prices can become too high. I kind of said it here. We can look at Apple computers versus Microsoft operating system computers. Until 2023, Macs were the higher price option in the laptop space. And their market is their ecosystem. That's people who use iPhones, iPads, this, that. And people don't typically like to leave that. And I'm having a similar thing now with my son, who isn't a fan of the Windows operating system. And frankly, for what he wants to major in, the Windows operating system might not be for him. So I found better price points with Apple now compared to a similar device, say, I bought for my daughter 3 years ago. So he'll go to college in the fall with a Mac because there was something available that fit his need. I'm not going to go into more about customers or suppliers. How do we deal with competition? Well, there's 4 ways. We can be the low-cost leader, meaning we're Walmart. Now, you go to Walmart, their goal is to get you in there for what you want and leave with much more than that. They have the ability to send managers to their physical competition and on the fly lower prices. And they have a bot network where they can send out pricing bots or automated means of gathering data on the internet to be able to make sure they're the low-cost leader. You could be doing something that's product differentiation. We make something that's different than our competitors, i.e. anything Apple-based. We can focus on our market. What do we do that we don't want to leave? Say a mom and pop computer repair place. They know their role. They're not going to go out selling computers. They're not going to beat the Best Buy at that. You'd probably get better service from them than you would KeekSpot. And lastly, strengthening our customer supplier intimacy. Things in this 4th bullet that we're going to look at in chapter 9 with customer relationship management tools. How we can make sure we're getting what we want when we want it from either one of these relationships. We talked about low-cost leader, product differentiation. Our author brings up Google and Nike. No idea why they bring up Google. You look at Google's competition as Microsoft and Apple. Microsoft, in that they have the same suite of tools that customers can leverage, and Apple, they have the different storage metrics and the other services they have. There's really no product differentiation with the search engine part of their business, but it's that back office section that they have product differentiation. And Nike, it's probably going to be with their Air shoes or their Flywire shoes or their cushioning or their relationship with athletes. Now for our FedEx, and I just want to stop for a second, make sure my sound is good, and we're good.
With close to 6 decades of shipping wars between them, United States Postal Service and Federal Express are 2 shipping companies that have made a name for themselves globally. Although they are immediately recognizable by their different logos and branding techniques, there's more to these companies than aesthetics. If you wanted a package sent to you, there's a huge chance that it would be one of these shipping brands, so we felt a need to draw a comparison between them. Which one is better when it comes to shipping time? Who has cheaper rates and a larger fleet? If you had to pick one for your business, which is a better choice? We're about to answer all these questions and more, so stick with us. But first, to understand who UPS and FedEx are, we need to take the story from the top. Here's how FedEx came to life. The birth of FedEx. FedEx started thanks to a few revolutionary ideas that were present in Fred Smith's paper at Yale University. When telling the story, lots of people claim that the professor gave Fred a C on the paper and told him the ideas would never work. But this is actually not true. The man himself can't remember the grade he got on the paper, but FedEx came to life due to some concepts that he deployed from here. So what exactly was this idea? First, Fred thought it would be much better to ship packages on dedicated planes rather than relying on commercial passenger planes. At the time, this was the standard, but it made shipping much slower since they had to rely on the schedule of the passenger planes. He also thought that it would be better to have one central hub for shipping everything rather than making them pass between cities. As you can imagine, these were all elaborate ideas that required a great deal of capital to get on the road. Fred needed several tools, especially hundreds of employees and a fleet of trucks and airplanes. Luckily for him, this was no ordinary American trying to get by. His rich background came in handy as he had $4 million in inheritance to splurge. But this was only a little out of what he needed. Fred quickly got to work on getting investors who wanted a stake in the company and who were willing to lend him some money. Of course, more than a few people were ready to listen to the groundbreaking delivery concepts coming from a man who was in the Marines as a pilot and had an economics degree from Yale. But things didn't start out as well as Fred had hoped. Within the first 26 months of existence, FedEx had lost more than $25 million already, thanks majorly to the energy crisis that had them spending thousands of dollars in fuel bills. At some point, Fred had just $5,000 available and needed to pay up fuel bill worth $24,000. He desperately searched for a loan and was denied at every turn. So he made the craziest move yet. At the last minute, he got on a flight to Las Vegas, where the fate of the company rested on the blackjack table. Well, he won that game with just enough money for the bill, and with higher morale, he was ready to face the business world again. Things changed in 1976, which was the company's first profitable year, and then just 2 years later, they had a public offering. As the pioneers of express shipping, business was booming, and they were the first company to ever report $1 billion in revenue within its first decade without mergers. With time, they moved internationally, trying to establish FedEx in Europe and Asia. And now that we know the origin of FedEx, let's look at UPS. How UPS came into existence. Now, long before FedEx had become an idea, we're talking about more than 60 years, UPS had already become a thing. The shipping company was established in 1907 by a 19-year-old who wasn't as wealthy as the founder of FedEx. All Jim Casey had was 6 bicycles to his name, so you can imagine how he had built the company from the ground up. First, they focused on delivering telegraphs, but this didn't stay for long as telephones began to grow in popularity. Demand reduced and UPS moved over to department store deliveries. At the time, people found it fascinating they could order something from the store and it would be delivered to you that same day. Again, another invention threatened to crumble this business, and this was the rise of cars. By the 1950s, people could just drive over to the store and get whatever they wanted. Once again, UPS changed tactics and moved fully into delivering packages. Since that's what we know them for majorly, you can guess that this aspect stuck, and they built their brand surrounding these services. You can see that despite offering similar services, UPS and FedEx are two completely different companies. As major competitors, they have been at each other's throats for years, trying to be better than the other. While UPS was more conservative with how they raised funds and didn't have an IPO until after 90 years of operation, FedEx was more aggressive with loans and a move towards the stock market within 5 years of launching. So which is better between these two shipping giants? Let's look at a few selling points. Which has a better rate? Overall, FedEx is more expensive than UPS. If you wanted to ship a 22-pound package from New York to LA, UPS would charge you approximately $227 for next-day delivery, while you would be paying a whopping $280 via FedEx. There's about a $30 difference, as well as if you want your package delivered within 2 working days, with FedEx being higher. UPS is cheaper than FedEx by about $1 for ground shipping, so you can see the pattern here. When it comes to having better rates, we know who the clear winner is. However, one major difference between these two is that despite how similar they may seem, one is known more for air deliveries while the other is associated more with ground deliveries. When you think of FedEx, your mind immediately conjures a plane, while you think of a truck when you think of UPS pops in your head. Still, as the years go by, these shipping companies are becoming more and more like each other. Who has the larger fleet? To answer this question correctly, we need to know who is bigger between these two companies. Well, according to the 2020 ranking of companies in the United States based on revenue, UPS came in at number 43, while FedEx was ranked 49th. However, let's check out their revenue for 2021. One good thing about the pandemic is that it pushed people to order more online and the demand for shipping services skyrocketed. So thanks to this, UPS reported revenue of $22.9 billion for the first quarter of 2021. Which is 27% more than what they reported for the first quarter of 2020. FedEx also did as well, according to its fiscal year report for 2021. The company $21.51 billion, which is a 23% increase from the same quarter of the previous year. Between these two companies, they deliver as many as 30 million packages daily. You can see that's a whole lot. When it comes to domestic deliveries within the United States, UPS takes the winning belt. But FedEx is the winner for international deliveries. That's mostly because UPS has a larger fleet of ground vehicles, and they understand their power in this field. So they utilize more in domestic ground package delivery. FedEx, on the other hand, is about double the number of planes that UPS has, which makes them a force to be reckoned with when it comes to international shipping. Their specialty is global air express freight. So here's an overview of these shipping giants. UPS came up next to nothing and slowly built itself into the global brand with billions of customers around the world. FedEx was a little late to the party, but that didn't stop them from combining aggressive marketing and revolutionary ideas with a ton of money until they could find their footing. They were enough of a challenge to UPS, so much that the company had to keep upgrading and adopting new ideas over the next several decades to keep up. Despite being similarly sized, they have their specialties and are more like each other than we know. Now you know a little bit more about the shipping wars of America, and that's a wrap. Have you ever gotten a package delivered through one of these companies? What was your experience with them, and which one do you prefer? Let us know.
So let's look at the new entrant with Porter's competitive forces model into this shipping war, and that's Amazon. Well, Amazon's not really your international choice for logistics, nor do they really take stuff from me and deliver it to you. They use their marketplace as a stranglehold of e-commerce to deliver goods and services. Usually you'll see stuff from Amazon either come US Post Office or from their own trucks here in the US. They very rarely will use a UPS or FedEx. They will if needed, because they can provide a lower cost to me, the consumer, than either of these two can. So there's where, UPS and FedEx have to start reacting to Amazon in the US front and probably every local front around the globe. Our last couple of bullets on Porter's focus on what we do. That's our market niche. I'm not sure what the author means by Hilton Hotels, but just think of a company that doesn't leave its lane, that does what it does, and strengthen our customer supplier intimacy. I'm not sure why we have Toyota and Amazon here, because we want to make it hard for someone else to buy something somewhere else. We do see in the automobile industry where we have a lot of brand loyalty. So maybe that's why our author chooses Toyota. For me, I like GMC vehicles. So I have a Chevy pickup and my wife has a GMC SUV. And frankly, I was looking at other brands when I bought my truck 2 years ago, but I chose to stay what I knew. And they give us promotions throughout the year. The internet has really enabled new entrants into the competitive forces place. We have better opportunities for building brands and loyal customer bases. Let's look at Vuori clothing with its competition with Lululemon. Both companies have leveraged social platforms for marketing. They use influence to market their brands. And more people are Vuorian because of athletes they've chosen with their NIL deals. And Dick's has their own athleisure brand where they tried to battle those two. A lot of people have an opportunity to go to Dick's where they may not want the price of those other two brands. So we have relatively new market entrants with Vuori, Lulu, and Dick's have been battling for a while. That's kind of how competitive forces work because of the internet. You don't see Vuori in a lot of brick and mortar shops. but they do a hell of a job selling online. The internet transforms into industries, and I can't tell you, I don't think I booked with a travel agent once in my life, I believe. I grew up with encyclopedias. It's funny, I like to read the New York newspapers, particularly New York Post, but only the sports section. When I was an undergrad at St. John's, I would drive from Yonkers, cross a bridge into Queens to get there. And I'd always buy the 3 New York City newspapers at the time, not included New York Times. I'd buy Newsday, which is a Long Island paper, the Daily News, and the Post. I had to be at campus at all kind of weird times just to get a parking spot, so I would sit and read the sports sections. Well, I can just go on my phone now and look up anything on the Post website that I want. The third bullet, universal standards allow new rivals entrance to the market. We're going to learn about something called TCP/IP. And that's a network protocol, and I'm not going to bore you with it now, but that protocol has enabled the internet to be worldwide. So what did we get out of that? We got goods coming directly to us from China. We have a market where we can buy and sell high-end sneakers because we can get them from anywhere. We have this whole dupe market, which I'm relatively knowing anything about. But it's because we can open up China and Vietnam and places we normally wouldn't keep open. I have no idea why our author brings on smart products and Internet of Things. We'll talk about IoT when we talk about infrastructure. These are devices that normally would not be on the internet, but guide our everyday life. It's what we talk about when we talk about a sensor network. We look at, I'll talk about my truck again. I have sensors in the front, rear, and side of the exterior of my vehicle, and it tells me when I'm going to hit something when I'm parking forward, when I hit something going backwards, when I hit something when I'm moving left to right. We can look at lighting and how we can control lighting on our own campus through a computer. We can interact with Alexa to give us a recipe. We have health trackers like the Apple Watch I'm wearing or my continuous glucose meter that I have in my arm. All devices that are relatively new in the marketplace that have changed the way we live. What's hard about smart products that when you choose a supplier, you usually don't leave that supplier. Meaning there's 2 main ways these devices communicate. And these 2 operating systems are always at competition with each other, Z-Wave and Zigbee. And they connect to things like Google Homes or Alexas. And frankly, once you choose Alexa, you're staying with Amazon. Just like when we're buying Apple, we stay with Apple. But think of IoT as an ever-growing sensor network that helps us or helps municipalities do something. And we'll talk about smart cities this semester. We'll look at a little further at the city of Dubuque, Iowa. We may throw one in Kipsey. Most of our chapters will have something that deals with this business value chain model, which looks like this. At the bottom, we have an industry value chain that shows an individual marketplace. We see support activities in an organization, and we see activities of particular organizations. This slide, it's really a manufacturing company. So we look at our primary activities. We have inbound logistics, meaning the part of our supply chain where we have raw materials coming in. We have operations. We have sales and marketing, service, and outbound logistics. What's missing here is our manufacturing. We have the tools above that show us how to do all this and where we get particular things or send finished goods to. It's not a great drawing, but The value chain model sees our organization as a series of activities to do something with the service that we offer. I'm going to omit products here because not every company sells something, but any company that has some kind of revenue will sell at least a service. We highlight those activities where we can put porters in place. Thus, we're really looking here. We can put our competitive forces model in place with our primary activities, not so much our support activities. At each stage of this value chain, how can ISIT make it more efficient? How do we go back and how do we survive? How do we get this market leader, low-cost leader, or whoever else we want to be within that porter's competitive forces model? The video for the chapter that I give as assignment does a great job with porters and the value chain model. I'm going to talk about the value web. Synergies are a great thing. When the output of some units are used as input to others or organizations' pool markets and expertise. Think of nothing about what the author puts here. Think about YouTube and its history and its purchase of Google. Meaning, Google started out as a search engine company, and they were very profitable. The only really competition was Yahoo and Microsoft, looking some 20 years ago or so. But Google's executive board, seeing a move to video content and predicted correctly that all of our lives would be turned over by our smart devices, and we want to watch all kind of content however we can get it. So Google bought YouTube. And that changed the direction of everything else Google does, that one purchase. They now have the revenue streams that they could make the G Suite. Gmail wouldn't be here if we didn't have YouTube bought by Google. Either with Google Docs, Google Drive, Google this, Google that. I mean, hell, I'd have to use the lady on my Apple Maps if Google Maps wasn't around. That's a great way to look at synergies, where we've done something to change the way our organization really is. Core competencies is what we do better than anyone else. Look at Marist, we have one of the best fashion schools. We have a accredited business school. We do sports broadcasting better than anyone else, or as good as anyone, the world leaders. We have a campus that, there's few that are as pretty as it. Think of what we do better than someone else. And that's what we want to focus our energies on. That's also why we outsource activities that don't match this core competency. I'm not going to talk about network-based strategies, nor network economies. Just realize the value of anything grows the more it's used. So we're going to look at computer networks, and it's two or more computers connected together. It's worthless just a peer-to-peer network with two devices. You have 1,000 devices as we have on campus. That's a powerful computer network. Value of software grows as it's installed. Microsoft Word has been the #1 word processing platform ever since it came about in 1984, 85. It's more valuable today than it was back then, because not only do we have a cloud offering, cloud meaning on the internet, we also have an installed version that's simply better than anyone else's. It's bought more than any other platform, thus making it more valuable than, say, anything Google has to offer. Virtual company models, we see a lot in the initial parts of our logistics supply chain, where we have companies that don't have a brick and mortar shop. They're truly digital, but they do produce a physical good. Our author uses Lian Feng, who makes garments for brands like Forever 21. We'll look at Nike supply chain and we'll see it has a slew of virtual companies manufacturing their apparel and footwear in Southeast Asia. Business ecosystems. When I see this, I think of Apple. I don't think of Microsoft or Facebook or anything else. I think of once we've bought our iPhone, we're Apple. Except me, I have two MacBooks. I don't use any of them, but to help my students out when Pearson doesn't work right with Apples. But that's what I mean. It's something that's making it hard for us to go somewhere else. I think from a Microsoft platform perspective, they're looking at the Windows operating system and Microsoft 365, which we all use as our enterprise tool for communications and back office work. We're going to finish up with challenges to strategic information systems. But first, I have to tell you what strategic is. Most organizations, again, those with a structure, have a plan. Usually that plan is now, a year later, and 3 to 5 years later. And that 3 to 5 years is what I'm talking about when I mean strategic. How can we maintain our advantage over our competition 3 years from now? Or if we're behind 8 ball with our competition, how can we retaliate against that competition to be able to compete? And I love this one. Competitors can retaliate and copy strategic systems. We see this every day in the IT world because we often borrow from others. I guess it's a kind of cheating, but Microsoft Windows was invented with its version 3.1 in the early 80s as a theft of Apple. Windows' first graphic operating system looked just like the Mac operating system did back then. Systems may become tools for survival. If we've matched the system with business processes and have user impact through our development, testing, and production, we're definitely going to survive as an organization. If we don't give our customers, our employees, the tools to meet our strategic systems, our strategic plan, we're not going to survive. I'm not going to talk about here. This is the most important thing I think about when I deliver this chapter. How do we align IT with a business, their objectives, and their processes to succeed? And I want to go on my rant here because I know we talked about the IT-IS hierarchy. All too often, the IT hierarchy is not thought up enough in strategic system development. More too often, the business does what the business does without interaction from their biggest spender, the one that can keep us to be strategic and competitive. Not aligning IT makes it very difficult for us to break through politics, to implement change and have it accepted. So until IT and the CEO has the same place in the organization as those under him, in my mind, the CIO has to have an equal place at the C-suite, that we're going to have a hard time sustaining ourselves. Again, this is a political statement here. IT has to be important. We all have to use systems of one ilk or another, and it comes with alignment. So remember, give me the disruptive technologies. Tell me about your experience with change to Brightspace. I'm going to start posting these on YouTube as Zoom has been a little fickle lately. So I'll have them both up today. Hope you have a great week and we'll talk to you next.